Well, good morning. This is Apostle John Welty with Second Eighth Week Ministries, and today is Sunday, August 21st, 2011, and I'm coming to you live from Walford, Iowa, in the United States. We're going to pick up here where we left off in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. And you might remember here last week we were talking about we ended talking about charity. Okay, in verses 8 and 9 here. 1 Peter chapter 4 verses 8 and 9, where Apostle Peter was saying, and above all things have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins, and use hospitality one to another without grudging. We were talking about this, and charity is not as defined by man, but it's as defined by God. Okay, man has defined for himself a language for faith. Okay, which is not the same as the language that God established for faith. Okay, which has to do with first generation knowledge and further generation knowledge, which we talked about in the Breaking the Antichrist Code book, which was written by Chief Elders Apostle Eric and Chief Teacher Maria, uh, with and which you can get that book on Amazon, or there's various places you can order it. But in that we talk about that first generation knowledge versus further generation knowledge. Now it's the further generation knowledge where we see the doctrines of men, okay, which the apostles spoke about in the epistles here, which Jesus also addressed in talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which were the religious leaders during the time of his earthly ministry. Okay, he was correcting their thinking. They had established for themselves and adopted a language for faith, okay, and a language for religion, right, um, which had its roots, okay, in that which was in that which the written record, all right. But they had then taken the definitions and changed the boundaries. Okay, you notice in the Old Testament that God said you should not change the boundaries or move the boundary markers. Okay, this is what they've done with the knowledge. Okay, or in other words, God set a framework around, for instance, the element of grace. And we talked about this, I believe, last week as concerning the whole stones. Okay, each element of the foundation knowledge of Christ, okay, is as a whole stone, which makes up the altar. There's 12 stones to the altar. There's 12 elements, okay, which make up the gospel of Christ and truth. Okay, the doctrine of Christ, that foundation of truth in the heart, which must be laid, okay, for us to function in that priesthood, which we've been talking about. Okay, well, charity is one of those elements. Okay, grace, faith. Okay, these are elements of that foundation. Okay, each being a whole stone. Now, when we talk about changing the boundaries or the definition of these things, okay, it has to do with as to lifting an iron tool, okay, to cut the stone, right, to make that stone reflect yourself, or to become an expression of yourself. Okay, which is you can see with like an artist, okay, is using paints or tools, woodworking or whatever it is, in order to create something that's an expression, okay, of themselves. There's something to be seen about that artist in his work. Okay, that's the same thing that they do with the knowledge of Christ. Okay, and it becomes then further generation knowledge because it's been altered. Okay, it was received whole, but now it's been altered. Okay, well, now it's no longer of any use for the altar of Christ. Okay, because the altar of Christ must be built with whole stones. Those whole stones must remain intact and remain whole, okay, which has to do with receiving truth as God defines it. Okay, not filtering it through our own personal definitions. Okay, if we're working with our own principles and our own aspirations, that has to do with that the knowledge that we receive, we want to filter through that principle. Okay, and our expectations get affected by our projections of aspiration. Okay, we're projecting those that work with the principle and the aspiration instead of faith. Okay, they project an outcome for their peace and their security. So when they say that that I feel a peace about this, okay, what they're actually saying is they're not talking about the peace of God. And peace is another element of the gospel. Okay, they've changed that definition. Okay, they're not talking about the peace of God, or they're not talking about peace with God. What are they talking about? Okay, they're talking about the peace of the world, okay, which comes from projecting for your outcome, okay, projecting for your peace and security. Or in other words, I've ran this through my head, and I can see how this might work out, in my favor. So I'm at peace with this. Okay, looks bad now, but I'm not going to tell you necessarily how I see this playing out, but you know, I'm at peace with this. That's the peace of the world. Okay, that works with the imagination. That doesn't work with faith. Okay, a lot of people will call that faith. Okay, because their hope uh, seems to be out of reach. Okay, but they have charted for themselves a path to that. Okay, and they're projecting for that outcome, which is where they're getting this false sense of peace. Okay, which is how soothsayers work. Okay, they tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what uh, you know. They present for you a chain of scenarios that might possibly happen to get you to a certain outcome, which would be good, and that comforts people. Okay, they use that to comfort one another. It's called tickling the ears, also. Okay, but it's not truth. Okay, faith doesn't work with that knowledge, and faith doesn't work with those tools. It doesn't work with the imagination. It doesn't work with projecting. Okay, that's so those that choose those tools are left to work with the principle and the aspiration, right, which gets them nowhere. There's no power in that. There's no direction in that. Okay, and so you have these cycles of flattery and despondency, where they're projecting and they think everything's going to go well, and then it doesn't go out, it doesn't turn the way they expected, and then there's a cycle of despondency until they find some form of inspiration in order to project with again, and project for their peace and security again, until they find out that that doesn't meet their expectations, and then they go through the cycle of despondency again. It's just a circle. It's like a rat race, right? Um, and so charity is one of those elements that has been redefined also. They all have. Grace has, faith has, righteousness has, sanctification, holiness. All of these things have been redefined by the doctrines of men, okay, which make the knowledge of none effect. Okay, and what that means is that the knowledge is no longer effectual for regeneration. Okay, you can make application with that knowledge, but it won't be of any benefit to your soul. It's of no benefit to your soul, because your soul, okay, was designed not for this dimension of darkness. It was not designed for this environment separate from God. It was designed to abide in the light of God and to continue to increase in His substance, okay, which is why He says above all things charity, because charity is the distribution factor, okay, of the virtues of Christ. Okay. Now charity is not Adam's benevolence. Okay, when I say Adam, I'm talking about Adamites. Okay, humans. Right, those are the flesh. Okay. uh, some people like to define Christianity as seeing goodness in one another. Okay, that's that again is working with the imagination and projection. All right, God sees the heart, and God judges according to faith. Okay, the people that we like to identify. Well, he's a good person. He's not a good person. That's not according to God. Okay, that's according to carnal discernment. All right, which is with carnal discernment. Okay, Jesus was hung on a cross, wasn't he? Okay, because he didn't fit their expectations. Right, he didn't allow them to work with their imagination and their principle and their aspiration. Okay, he set boundaries and restrictions with the knowledge that he was sharing, and they found that to be a great offense. Okay, they called that evil. They called good evil. Okay, they called perfect reprobate. Okay, to the point of him being put on a cross to be hung as a criminal, right? Okay, one who had transgressed against God. Okay, that God Himself had transgressed against Himself is other foolishness, because they didn't recognize Christ. Okay, they weren't beholding Christ. All they saw was a man. Okay, and they saw a man that they felt that they could conquer and overcome. So they projected a peace and security that would come to them, okay, if they put Jesus to death. Okay, so they projected an outcome, okay, and they followed through with that. So they felt that they were at peace with God. They felt at peace about this, and it must be the will of God, right? Because there's a peace, right? It's the peace of the world. Okay, that's how that works. We see this play out every day. There's books being written and published every single day about these things. Okay, to present false hopes for people and false paths to security. Okay, and if you do this, and if you follow this, and if you listen to this, okay, none of these things play out. Right? And what they don't understand is that the soul is eternal. Okay, and those that are trying to make the best of this world don't understand the purpose of this world. Okay, the time and the purpose of this world right now is for the testing of the heart. Okay, so that those of faith may take on the substance of Christ, experience the work of regeneration within their soul. Okay, in order for that, okay, they had to make application with knowledge which is pure, okay, which is not of none effect, but is of effect. Okay, it's effectual knowledge. Okay, truth is effectual knowledge because the Spirit will work with truth. Okay, as you work with truth, so will the Spirit work with truth. Now you're working with the Spirit. Okay, because truth is that common factor. The Spirit of God will work, okay, within the framework and the boundaries of truth. If you exercise your faith within the framework and boundaries of truth as well, okay, your faith will give expression not to yourself but to Christ. Okay, it's not in agreement with your principles and your aspirations. Okay, your imagination had to be brought within restrictions and humbled to the grace and truth of God. Okay, in order to come in agreement with the grace and truth, because of these boundaries. All right, and so as you come into agreement with God, okay, and your faith falls within the restrictions of truth, or as we say, it's like coloring within the lines, right? Okay, you're not drawing your own little pictures off to the side of the page, okay? You're coloring within the lines, okay? Then the Spirit also enters in to make your faith living. Okay, now truth, which is that knowledge, okay, is being made effectual by the power of the Spirit because your faith is joined to Christ through this contact point, okay? Government, truth, and Spirit. We receive truth, okay, through the headship of Christ, through his apostles first. Okay, that truth must be laid within the heart. So you see government, truth, and Spirit. These three act as one, okay, to be an effectual contact point. Now there's many people that are looking for some form of reality, okay? They're looking for something tangible, okay? And they're looking for it outside of Christ. When you share truth with them, they don't want to have anything to do with that, okay? And yet they're still looking for something tangible. They're looking for substance, okay? And so they look all throughout the world. They look through different philosophies and different systems of ways of thinking. It all boils down to idolatry. Okay, there's truth, which is first generation knowledge, okay, which has to do with that knowledge which was received from God in pure form, and then there's other knowledge. It's really that simple. From God's perspective, it's that simple. Now you may see that there's 50 million different philosophies, to try out and see if there's any merit to this one, is there any merit to that one. But from God's perspective, there's two. There's truth and there's other knowledge. It's purely that simple. So it doesn't really matter, okay, which of those 50 million other philosophies, okay, you want to take for a spin. You're working with other knowledge. Okay, if you're not working with truth, then you're without Christ. So you're seeking peace and security outside of Christ. There is no peace and security outside of Christ. That's why you'll read in the scriptures that God gives grace to the humble. Okay, but he turns his face against the proud, right? Okay, and that's a rough paraphrase there, but so let's get back to this for charity, though. So charity does not have to do with the benevolence of man. Okay, this isn't acts of goodness or acts of kindness type of thing. Okay, charity is the expression of truth. Okay, so in order for there to be charity, there must first be truth laid within the heart. Okay, without truth in the heart, there can be no charity. So if you're searching for truth, okay, you're not expressing charity. It's not possible. Okay, now you may have something that you call charity, okay, but it's not, according to God's definition, it's not charity, because God set the definition of charity, okay, as a twin to truth. Okay, the truth is the form that charity takes within the heart. Okay, and charity is the form that truth takes when it's expressive, or in other words, truth remains seated. Okay, charity moves about. Charity is active. Right? So charity is an expression of truth within the heart. If truth's not within the heart, then what's coming forth from the lips? What's being expressed? It's an expression of self. Now, if you are expressing self and identifying that with Christ, okay, then you are elevating yourself to be of greater value than Christ, because you feel that you can express him apart from his truth. Okay, so that is an offense to God. Or you're bringing Christ down to yourself, okay, to make him equal to the flesh, which is also offensive to God.